Hi everyone, I want to talk about composition today. So what is composition? Basically, it is just the arrangement of different objects and elements on a page in order to tell a story. It's that simple. I think when you first start painting, there is this temptation to jump straight in with the paints. We start working on our painting techniques, but perhaps we sometimes neglect the composition or the arrangement of the picture. Often the strength of a painting happens way before you even start to pick up a brush. It happens in that composition stage. So that's why in this tutorial, I want to look a little bit about the sort of fundamentals or the basics of composition, how we arrange objects within a scene, why we do that, and also how to create attention or how to lead the eye of your viewer through a scene. So let's get started with the basics of composition. Okay, so the simplest and most sort of basic compositional technique to learn is the rule of thirds. And this is just about splitting up any picture, any image into thirds, either horizontally or vertically. Let's look at this image here. So this is just a landscape scene with a rock in the center. Now, say for example, if we want this rock formation to be our focal point, if we want that to be our sort of the main thing people look at, sometimes it's not a good idea to keep it in the center of the picture. It's good to keep it slightly to the side, either slightly to the left and slightly to the right. If we draw the lines on, so let's draw two lines horizontally and two lines vertically, it's a good idea with the rule of thirds to keep your main object or keep your focal point around those points where the lines meet. So let's see what happens if we move or if we shift that rock formation so it lines up with those points in the rule of thirds. So you can see that we haven't really changed a massive amount about the composition, but it because it's slightly off center and because it's on those third axes, it looks more aesthetically appealing, and it means it's easier for our eye to get drawn toward it. You can use this technique for any picture you do and give it a try. You'll find out that naturally all of your compositions will look a bit better if it's a bit off center. Same applies to the horizon line. If the horizon line is right in the middle of your picture, it doesn't look quite right, but if you shift it either up or down so it meets those third lines, it'll generally look a lot better. So I'm going to show you 9 different compositional structures that will help you compose and create scenes when you're sketching and painting outside. So these 9 structures I've taken from this book, which is Edgar Payne, Composition of Outdoor Painting. This is a really, really old book. It's a really, really big book, but it's really, really helpful in terms of getting some basic rules about composing scenes outside. The book tends to focus a little bit more on landscape, but to be honest, all of these structures can be used for painting cities, painting people outside, because the structures and the shapes are so useful. This is quite a dense book. I mean, I wouldn't recommend reading it from cover to cover. I tried and I gave up halfway through, but I've taken a few of the sort of simple structures from that. I'm only going to show you 9 today. There are many, many more in the book, but I can save these for a different tutorial. So let's get started. So these are the 9 different shapes of compositions. Now they look a little bit abstract at the moment, but I'll explain each one by one. But they're just used as a rough guide for how to compose all of your scenes. It's important to say that you can combine these. You shouldn't have to do them in isolation. So let's look at the first one. So the first structure we're going to be looking at is called a grouped mass. Now you may have noticed here that we just have sort of a collection of smaller objects that are grouped together to form this main mass. So you'll notice how it's slightly off center. Okay, remember the rule of thirds we looked at. So that grouped mass, it's kind of important to keep that either slightly to the left or slightly to the right. So here's an example of a grouped mass. This is one of Edgar Payne's pictures, and you can see he's using boats. So instead of having just one boat, he's actually grouped a collection of them together to form a grouped mass. This doesn't have to just be boats. You can group buildings together, you can group people together. But the idea behind this is if you group people together, it creates a kind of a sort of focal collection that our eye is naturally drawn to. So here's another example of a grouped mass of mountains. Again, it's a little bit more central this time, but what he's done is he collected them together to form one big shape. This is really important if you want to simplify a scene. If you're looking at a street scene or something outside and there's lots of different elements, try to think how you can group them together to provide a focal point. The next one we will look at here is the L shape. Now this is one I use quite often. I really like it because it leads the eye round. So you'll notice here in this example, again, another simple landscape scene, is that your eye kind of starts to the left and it's drawn down and then moves to the right. The L shape can go both ways. You can start on the left or you can start it on the right. But it's really good at kind of creating a path for your eye to follow. Here is an example of a picture I've done, which uses this L shape. This is a mosque in Myanmar. But you can see sort of naturally your eye starts either on the dome or the minaret, and you works your way down and then moves to the left like an L. This is a really, really useful compositional tool for buildings or street scenes. Often when we look at lots of different buildings, it can be hard to figure out how we want somebody's eye to move, but with this provides a very, very simple structure. Now this next one is called balanced scales. This one is a little bit more difficult to explain, but essentially it's about providing balance and harmony to the scene, so everything has kind of equal proportion and weight. In the simplest sense, you can see here we have this landscape with two mountains or hills, and they're roughly the same size. So it provides a nice sense of balance, a nice sense of unity. Here is a picture of a church in Portugal that kind of roughly follows these principles. You know, instead of doing the church at an angle, I decided to do it head on. Both towers are quite balanced. Everything is quite weighted. I don't use this particular framework very often. I like to keep things a little bit off center. I like a lot more negative space, but I think it's a useful one just to be aware of. The next one here is called radiating lines. The idea behind this is if we want a certain object to be our focal point, we can use other lines or other objects in order to point toward that object. In the simplest sense, it could be a sun, for example, and you can have the light coming from the sun. This example here, so we have a tree and we have the shadows. So you can clearly see from this image that the focal point of the center of attention is this tree. And we have the shadows that kind of provide a natural arrow that focuses your attention toward that tree. Another example here, you can see these trees again with the shadows. It's almost directing your eye toward a certain point. Now, this doesn't have to just be done with shadows. You can use things like clouds. You can use things like mountains or buildings in order to focus your attention toward a specific point. Now this next one is called Three Spots, and really it's just a good way of arranging a very, very busy scene and simplifying it into threes. So here's the example that Edgar Payne has used, and we just have a simple landscape scene, and you can see that instead of drawing all of the trees or one tree, he's done it 3 times. And you've got a big one here, and then a slightly smaller one on the left, and a smallest one on the right. I think the important thing about the 3-spot rule is that the 3 objects must be in descending size. So it doesn't really work if they're all the same size. You need to have one that's slightly bigger that is your focal point. I often use this with crowds and people. And here's a good example of this. We've got a scene here. I'm not entirely sure where this is supposed to be set, this picture, but you can see that we've got 3 groups of people. So, but it's obvious that the largest group, which is these 2 people in the front with the umbrella, that's where your attention's supposed to go. And then you've got the second one, the person on there on the right, and then the third one is this carriage and the person there. So this provides a kind of hierarchy, but it also provides an order in which you're supposed to look at the scene. 1, 2, and 3. This one here is called the circle composition. Now this may be a little bit sort of harder to see in pictures, but essentially it's about providing a frame for the different elements on the page. Simple example here is the clouds. The clouds have been arranged here almost in a circle formation that allows you to look into the center. Now it's important to say that any objects can really be used to form that circle. This example here, we just have a archway, but because it forms a frame, it forces your eye to go right into the middle of the picture. This is very, very useful. You can use people, you can use birds, you can use clouds, whatever you can find to create that kind of circular frame that catches the viewer's attention. The next one here is one of my, probably one of my most preferred composition tools, which is the Steelyard. And it is just one large object that is balanced out, or unbalanced, should I say, with a smaller object to the side. And it provides a bit of a focus or a bit of a contrast to that larger object. Here is an example. So this is just you can see we have a church building here, and it draws your attention. And it draws your attention because it's not just by itself, it's contrasted with that lamppost and that building to the back there. This Steelyard composition is really good for providing weight. And because it's slightly off balance, it kind of directs your eye quite well. You can see that I've used it here in this painting of Manchester. So you can see I've put the main object, which is this Kimpton Clock Tower Hotel here on the left, and I balanced it out with a smaller collection of cars here on the right. If I take away those cars, the building would be fine by itself, but there's no contrast. There's no sort of counterbalance. So I think this is a really, really helpful tool for providing focus and providing a sense of scale. Now, this one is the S-curve. This is quite common in landscape painting. You'll have seen, like this example here, is that the S shape is a river. And it just provides a kind of direction for your eye to follow. Because it's an S, that S kind of disappears into the distance. So you'll probably see this the next time you look at a landscape picture. When you have that river, it provides a nice kind of route for your eye to follow. But it doesn't have to be just for landscapes. Here's an example of a photo of a road, and you can see that road is forming that S, and it allows your eye to kind of disappear into the distance. I sometimes use this when I'm doing people. So for example, if I want the people to kind of disappear into the distance, I will form them, or I will arrange them in a kind of an S shape. And this one here is the cross formation. The idea is that you have a horizontal line that is crossed over with some sort of vertical line, and it provides a nice bit of contrast. The simplest example here is you have trees in a wood, and you have the vertical lines of the trees contrasting nicely with the horizontal line of either the horizon or the trees in the background. Notice how in addition to this, you've got the radiating lines as well of those shadows. Here's an example I did. This is of a street scene in Myanmar, but you can see I've used this cross formation with the posts going vertically, and they contrast with the electrical wires going off. You could also argue that this is kind of a radiating line formation as well, because the wires are kind of going in towards a point. But yeah, essentially this is just about getting those different lines to intersect and to complement each other. So there we have the 9 basic formations from the Edgar Payne book. I should say that he's actually done dozens more of these, so I would encourage you to read the book if you have time. I may cover a few more of these, but in essence, these are the kind of the basic useful ones that I think you can go away and learn now. So the good thing about these compositional shapes is you can actually combine them together to form your own composition. You don't have to do them independently. So let's look at some examples of my paintings, and I'll show you how I've used these compositional shapes. First one is the street scene here in the UK. Now what I'd like you to do is just pause the video, have a think for a minute, what compositional shapes have I used for this? There are about 3 main ones. When you're ready, restart the video. So the first one I've used is the cross. You can clearly see this sort of vertical line of the tower and the horizontal line of the building. One of the reasons I honed in on that section is because you do get that nice cross contrast. Second one is radiating lines. Now this isn't from shadows, it isn't from clouds, but it is mainly from the perspective. So you can see the perspective lines of the buildings are coming out from the door of that tower. So that's what I want to be the focus. Your eye is drawn there. So those radiating lines really do a good job of focusing your attention to where that shadow and door is. Final one is Steelyard. So you can see you've got one large building here contrasting with the smaller building to the left. Steelyard is not so obvious, but still it's there, and we combine those all together to form this composition. So now the tower and that door is really where I want people's attention. Next one, picture in Chinatown. So again, just take a moment, pause the video, have a think, which of those compositional shapes have I used? I'll be doing this for every single one of my pictures, so please do feel free to just pause and have a think before we move on. So the first one I've used here is the circular composition. So you can see that I've kind of used the arch in Chinatown as kind of a framing device, and that forces your attention to look through the gap in the arch. Pretty similar to that photo example that I showed you. So the arch is already kind of helping me with the composition. As it is, I'm just using it. Second one would be the grouped mass. A little bit more difficult to see, but you can see I've used that whole tree and maybe the wall there kind of collectively together to form one big shape. I should say that grouped mass is also supporting the circle. So both trees on the side, that wall and everything, it's all kind of creating a circle around the arch. Next one is this alleyway scene, again in Chinatown in Manchester. The obvious one I'm using here is the Steelyard. So we've got that large wall on the left, contrasting nicely with the wall there on the left. Pretty good to use for alleyways. I don't want it always to be symmetrical, so Steelyard is a good way to provide a bit of contrast. And the L shape is also pretty obvious. Notice how I've used that shadow at the bottom to kind of reinforce that L shape a bit more and kind of creates the focal point into the middle of the scene. So here's another street scene here in Manchester. Quite a few different ones I've used in here, and they all kind of reinforce each other. First one is the radiating lines. You can see that all of the lines is coming from this lightest patch here, and you've got these streaking shadows that look like they're sort of radiating from that point in the middle right. Also the perspective as well kind of helps reinforce those lines. Second one is the L shape, which I've done with this building here on the right. Again, the L shape here is kind of used as a framing device. So it's almost used to kind of cup that lighter image and provide a bit of contrast to the light. Final one here, a little bit less obvious. It's just the 3 points that I've tried to use for the people. I think perhaps I've added in one too many people. It's not so obvious that it's a group of 3. But the idea was just to provide a bit of focus on that main guy walking there, and then for your eye to second go to the orange and sort of green couple. Now I want to do a quick exercise. I'm going to take a photo and I'm going to try and get as many different compositions as I can from that picture. So you can see how I have a sheet of paper I've split into grids of 4, and this is the picture we're going to be using first. This is a street scene in Thailand. I'm not entirely sure where. It's quite a complicated scene, which is kind of good because it means that we need to simplify it. So the first thing I'm going to do is to use the Steelyard composition here. So I think I want to keep the focus a little bit on the umbrellas and parasols and the people sitting there. So I'm going to do that as one sort of big object here on the left, and then we're going to complement it with something smaller on the right. Sometimes it is useful to think of things as these shapes and big objects. So I'm not thinking of these umbrellas and canopies as sort of separate objects. I'm thinking all of it as one big thing. Same goes for these tables here. Just adding in a bit of shading just to help myself out a little bit. So when I paint this, it'll probably just be one big shape. And then for the right-hand side, I think we'll want to continue this idea of the umbrellas and canopies, because I really want this to be the focus of this composition is this idea of people eating, street scenes. So I'm going to do a similar thing again on the right here, but we're going to go a bit lighter. I don't want that to be too big, and I don't want it to be too dark. I want to kind of keep that kind of steelyard composition. So I'm still adding in, a bit of the minaret from that mosque, but I'm not going too dark. So yeah, there we can see that's one idea. And I think the important thing is that this is just a way of generating some ideas. They're not final, I'm just experimenting. And I'll often do this before I do a proper picture. It's just do a couple of these thumbnail sketches, just experimenting with the types of composition. And this is where it's important to do a bit of shading as well. So the next one I'll do is the grouped mass. So I think I'm gonna just add in my rule of third lines, just so I know where to place that grouped mass exactly. And I think I'm going to place it on the right, and we're going to keep the focus now on the minaret and the mosque and the building underneath. Really, these shapes is just about keeping your audience's focus, and these shapes are just ways to keep focus. So I'm going to draw in this mosque here, but obviously it's not just the minaret, it's also the buildings below. So I'm going to combine them all into one big shape. And again, it's just sometimes really useful to start thinking of things as shapes. And notice how the main sort of focus points are hitting where those horizontal and vertical lines on the rule of thirds are meeting. Again, just keep drawing in. I mean, I really like negative space in my pictures. You might have noticed this. So using these shapes is a very, very good way of allowing yourself the freedom to leave a lot of blank space, but also to make sense as a picture. So I think that looks kind of cool. I'm going to throw in some people here. I mean, it's almost like an L shape as well, I would say. Your eye would start with the minaret and then move down to those people. Just going to add in a few more buildings in the background, but they're going to be so light because I still want to keep that group mass in the foreground. And I think I'm going to add in some of those wires and the flags on. It's kind of like a radiating line as well, actually. I think it just adds a little bit of extra focus. So you've got that L shape there and the grouped mass. And now you can see the radiating lines that I've added in here. So again, my plan wasn't really to add in all of these different styles. I was just experimenting. So you can see I'm putting the words FP here to show where the focal point is. Where do I want people's eye to go first? Now let's play around with the circle. Now this might be a little bit more difficult, but I think we're going to use what we have from the first two pictures to kind of create our own circle. So let's use the minaret here on the right. That's going to form the first frame. And again, not all of these compositions will work. I think it's important to say, I'm not going to like all of these that I do. I'm just practicing to see what I like the most. And if it doesn't work, you've not lost anything. It's just about experimenting. So now we're going to use, we're not going to use the umbrellas and parasols. I want to use go a little bit further into the background, but I'm still going to use this building on the left to kind of add in another side to this circle. Again, it's not an exact circle, but it is kind of having all of these elements that provide a frame. I'm going to use some of those people as well. I think they would help to round off the bottom. And then I am going to add in the buildings in the background, but they're going to be pretty light. I think what will happen with this is that because I've added this frame, your attention is going to go in the middle, but I don't want the middle to be too dark. Otherwise the frame won't really work. This is why I kind of sometimes put in shading. It's just to get that sense of light and dark. And I'm going to add in some of those wires. That's really useful to kind of round off. And you can see here how it's all kind of framed the background there. I'm going to add in a few more people. I'm not really happy that I don't think the bottom of this picture really has enough framing. So you can see how these frames are kind of pointing towards this sort of focal point in the bottom middle. And this is why I sometimes put these arrows on my picture, just to show you where your eye will go to. So that's heading towards that focal point. I really would encourage you to draw in these little arrows just to show you where you think the eye might go. Final one, let's do some one that focuses a bit more on radiating lines. So I think for this one I'm actually going to go in a little bit closer, and I'm going to use one of the people on the left here. It looks like they're eating noodles or something, and I'm going to try and make them the focal point, but I'm going to try and use perhaps the canopy or the umbrellas as kind of the radiating lines. I've got a bit of perspective here from this table, that kind of helps. So I'm not entirely sure this will work, but you know what, it's just worth giving it a try, isn't it? It's kind of less radiating lines, it's more kind of framing, I guess. But you notice how this guy is sort of sitting on one of those thirds, or where the horizontal and vertical third lines meet. So that was deliberate. Let's just add in a few more of these poles, just to see what we do. I mean, I'm not super happy with this particular composition, but you know, sometimes it's just worth trying to see if something will work, and it's much better to see if it will work on a thumbnail than it is to do on the real painting. Just adding in a bit of the gates, a bit of the metal doors, just to see if the perspective of that can kind of provide a bit more focus. Actually, that one on the left does. That kind of does help. And then a bit of sort of extra shadows and shading just to see if that would work. So we kind of got a cross with these poles, contrasting with the parasols, maybe a bit of radiating, but the important thing is that this person is the focal point. So there we go. 4 different ways to compose the same scene. I'm mixing and matching a lot of different compositional elements. So yeah, I would really encourage you to do this. Try and find a reference photo. Try and get a reference photo that's really complex, a little bit challenging, because that will give you a bit of extra practice, but it also give you a lot more things to work with when you're trying to compose your own scene. So there you have it. Hopefully in this tutorial we've looked at some of the basics of composition, and I've given you a few different structures that you can go out and use. I've attached the reference images, what I've used, in the comments below. So please, do have a practice. What I would recommend is going out somewhere, pick a location, in a coffee shop, outside, inside, and just see and experiment. See how many different types of composition you can get out of one scene. Thanks for joining. Look forward to seeing you next time.